Hello and welcome to Philosophy Vibe, the website where we discuss and debate different philosophical ideas. Today we're going to be following on from the knowledge of the external world debate and looking at John Locke's primary and secondary qualities. Now, if you recall in the last debate, we discussed indirect realism. Yes, this was the idea that we only perceive the physical world indirectly. There is sense datum between the physical world and our minds, and we only directly perceive the sense datum. Correct. An advocate of this theory was the philosopher John Locke. Now, he argued that reality can be divided into two categories, primary and secondary qualities. If we take an object, let's say an ice cream, the primary qualities are the extension, the figure, the motion, the solidity, and the number. These primary qualities are mind independent. They exist in the physical world external to us. However, the ice cream also has secondary qualities. What are the secondary qualities? These are things like the colour of the ice cream, the taste and the smell of the ice cream, even the sound of the ice cream. These are all secondary qualities, and these are mind dependent. These are ideas in our minds that we perceive. They do not exist in the external object, but Locke explains it as the primary qualities have powers which create in our minds the secondary qualities we perceive. So let's pick up the ice cream again. This object's extension and figure exist outside my mind in an external reality, but the taste and the colour of the object does not exist outside my mind. This is a colourless, tasteless object, but when I see it, its extension and figure produce the perception of colour into my mind, and that is what I see. When I take a bite of the ice cream, the primary qualities again produce the idea in my mind of a delicious chocolatey taste. So, we only perceive the world indirectly. There is a physical world, but it's the powers of the primary qualities of the objects that make us see it in a very different way than what it actually is. Okay, so why does Locke take such an indirect realist stance? Locke uses a lot of good examples to back up this theory. I'll discuss a few now. Locke asks us to imagine the red and white colours in porphyry. If we take away light, we cease to perceive the colours. The colour is dependent on light. Let's say we now put green light on the porphyry. We now perceive the red and white porphyry as green. The colour changes. It can disappear and look different at different times and at different angles. But the porphyry's solidity remains the same. It is always perceived in the same way. So we can see a distinction between how we perceive an object's colour to how we perceive its extension. Locke then has good grounds to make a distinction between primary and secondary qualities. Yeah, I see. Locke uses another example of hot and cold water. Let's imagine one person puts their hand in ice and another person on hot coals. Then each person puts their hand in a bucket of room temperature water. Now, the person who had their hand on ice will feel this water as warm, but the person who had their hand on coals will feel this water as cool. How can the same water be both warm and cool at the same time? That is a contradiction. Rather, the hotness or coldness does not exist in the water, but is merely a sensation in our minds produced by the powers of the water's primary qualities. Again, we can see good grounds for a distinction. Yes, I understand. And one more point I would like to raise. Go on. Locke uses the example of fire. If you touch fire, you feel pain, right? Yes. Well, you wouldn't say the pain you feel is in the fire. No, the pain is in my body. Exactly. The fire may have caused the pain, but the pain does not exist in the fire, external to our minds. Rather, it is a sensation in us, something we perceive. Yeah. So why would you say the pain is not in the fire, but the colour is? Now can you see how much of reality is just in the mind? The pain of the fire is an idea. The temperature of the water is just an idea. How can the same water have two different sensations? How can the same object have two different colours? How can the same food taste delicious to one person yet horrible to another? This is all just mental ideas. It is secondary qualities caused by primary qualities. Okay, I see where you're coming from, but there is still a very big problem with Locke's distinction of primary and secondary qualities. What's that then? Well, the main basis of the distinction is that secondary qualities can appear different at different times and to different minds, whereas the primary qualities remain constantly. Yes. This is not necessarily true. Primary qualities are also subject to change and inconsistencies, just like secondary qualities. How? If we take a building, when we are close to the building it looks very big, but if we stand far away, the building looks very small. So what size is the building? What is the correct way we should perceive its extension? The building's extension is different at different times. We perceive it both tall and small. How should the mind perceive it? What should the building look like? Yeah, I see. So, if Locke is to be consistent, he cannot really make a distinction between primary and secondary qualities, because if he bases secondary qualities on the fact that we perceive them in different ways, then we must apply this to primary qualities as well. So, there cannot really be a distinction. Okay, so if you're saying there is no distinction between primary and secondary qualities, are you saying that all of an object's qualities are mind independent and in an external reality? No, that would be naive realism, and Locke has shown that a lot of what we perceive is mind dependent. However, I think Locke has unintentionally shown that even primary qualities may be mind dependent. So what are you arguing? Well, think about it. With Locke's primary and secondary quality distinction, it has put a veil of perception over our eyes. He is basically saying that we can never perceive the world directly. We only perceive our ideas directly. If that is the case, then how can we argue in favour of an external world causing ideas in our minds if we have not and cannot ever directly perceive this external world? If we can never come in contact with the external world, but only come into contact with our ideas, then why would we need to assume there exists such a thing? It would seem we must take the extra leap and perhaps say even primary qualities are mind dependent, that all of reality is just ideas in the mind, that not even primary qualities exist outside the mind. There is no external world. Reality is just in the mind. Interesting. That is the theory of idealism, developed by the philosopher George Berkeley. We will look closer at this in the George Berkeley on Idealism video, but for now that's all the time we have. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed the vibe, and please check out the website for some other videos.